Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second of 6 webinars that we're hosting today, all around governance, risk and compliance, which for Risk Evolves is clearly what we do. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Tim Sismy, and Tim and I don't think we've actually worked together, have we, Tim? But we've been collaborating on a couple of projects indirectly together. And Tim is my go-to person for ISO 45003 and anything related to workplace psychological health. And Tim's going to go into this in a little bit more detail. Just for those of you that haven't joined a Risk Evolves webinar before, and this is the second one of 6 that we'll be holding across today, and it's the first set of webinars that we're holding in 2022. We did a number in 2021, and we will be holding more of them throughout the year. Couple of things for you. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Risk Evolves webpage next week. If you want to share it with any friends, any colleagues, then please do so. As I say, it is being recorded, so if you raise any questions, etc., just please be mindful of that. Although any questions that you raise will be obviously done in an anonymous way. And to raise a question, please just click the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel, type it in there, and I'm certainly very happy to put Tim on the spot about some of the questions and some of the approaches that we have in this. We are as well going to have another series of webinars, hold the date for June the 23rd. And as we leave this recording, you'll just get a really quick question on how useful you found the recording, whether you want to know anything more about what the service of Risk Evolves delivers, and more as well about how Tim can help and support you in the workplace, and just any other general feedback. So without further ado, I'm going to skip over the what we do slide, because this is what we do. We are unashamedly governance, risk and compliance geeks, and as I say, we have webinars running throughout the day on the other topics. And what was really interesting, I was talking to Terry earlier. Terry Morris joined me on the session. The first session was talking very much around governance, and we spoke there about the tone from the top of organisations. So what's the culture of an organisation, and how is that tone from the top managed and moved through the rest of the organisation? We talked about music in the middle, and then we talked about the beat of the feet on the ground. So before I let Tim discuss in a little bit more detail what he does and how he works with organisations, I just wanted to share a couple of slides with you that I had the real good fortune to work with the International Labour Organisation as part of a presentation that Risk Evolves was doing with the International Institute of Risk and Safety Managers. And there were some numbers there that really stood out for me and made me go, oh wow, this is just terrific. So and Tim, I know you're really passionate about this. Health and safety is not just about slips, trips and falls, is it? It's a lot broader than that now. And certainly these stats here, 750,000 deaths are caused every year because of long working hours. That for me was a real wow figure, Tim, and I don't know what your thoughts and feelings are on that. I don't know what evidence have you seen, and unfortunately, have you seen any examples of where long working hours are contributing to ill health and, gosh, hopefully not death? But
well, yeah, I'm fortunate. I've not come across anything that extreme. It's interesting because one of my first exposures to this whole area, and when I first started to work with, or found out that ISO 45003 was coming. I was having a conversation with some people who had done a lot of research into long hours and night shifts and night working and so on. And then again, I was just at the Health and Wellbeing at Work conference the last couple of days, talking to a lot of people there again about night shifts and the level of, if you work night shifts, you're vastly more likely to develop serious health problems. You're vastly more likely to get divorced. You're vastly more likely to have to suffer the kind of things that happen in life that put mental stress, a bit of stress on people's mental health. And it's the sort of thing where health and safety legislation just says health. It doesn't say mental health. It doesn't say psychological health. It also doesn't say respiratory health or musculoskeletal health. It's just health. But because a lot of the non-visible elements of our health are a little bit squishier and a little bit more difficult to spot, and people are less likely to talk about them, we've tended to, it's tended to sort of revert to being physical health and being about physical risks. And I think more and more as people are realizing that things like long working hours, and bear in mind, long working hours nowadays, particularly, that doesn't have to be shift work. You know, that doesn't have to be your night shift. It doesn't have to be that you're expected to be in a warehouse from midnight till 10 a.m. or whatever it is. I did some work with an organisation recently who are globally distributed, and there are people there who are doing really long days, 17, 18-hour days, really just because of the time zones. and it was almost by accident. It had kind of happened because they needed to talk to so-and-so, but so-and-so hadn't woken up that, so they would just carry on working. Yeah. And then that became the norm.
Yeah.
And the impact that has on their ability to function, cognitively, but also on their relationships and on the expectation at work and all of those things, is something that kind of, it's significant, but it's under the radar a lot of the time.
And the other slide that I pulled out from the double IRSM presentation, and very happy to share that presentation that we were on. As I say, it was delivered by a member of the International Labour Organization, and is on the double IRSM website and on our website. Was this one around the impact? And I think, Tim, this is just talking about some of the aspects that you're seeing there as well. And the increased risk of injuries due to reduced accuracy, that for me was like, oh, of course, actually, that's really obvious, isn't it? If you're tired, you're more likely to make mistakes, which may be at the risk of stating the obvious, but it was just one of those, of course, let's just step back and think about this in a much broader context of how people work in the workplace. So, Tim, I know that you want to talk a little bit more about ISO 45003. When we first met, you rightly said it's all very well and good having first aiders, and it doesn't matter whether you're a slips, trips and falls first aider or a mental health first aider. Your point was, if you need a first aider, something has already gone wrong. If you need to apply a plaster, something's gone wrong. If you need somebody who's struggling with to help support somebody with their mental health, something has gone wrong. Do you want to just explain a little bit more about that and what your thoughts are on how organisations should be considering psychosocial risks in the workplace and what they can do to evidence and to support their employees?
Of course. So I think it's really obvious if you look at the figures that we're really good at preventing physical harm in the workplace. We've got really good at that. And they're all, we have processes in place, we have people whose responsibility it is, and it's becoming rarer and rarer that we need to call on, your first aiders and so on, because we're really good at managing those risks. I think it's really fascinating that the rise of mental health first aiders in organisations as being like these armies of people who are equipped to be first responders for mental health is so at odds with this idea of like, well, let's give everyone a first aid kit in the workplace. That's not what we do. And in a working environment, we have first aiders and we have banisters on the stairs. We can do both. From what really struck me was when I first started looking at the kind of health and safety analogy with mental health, was that everything that we do, if you think about the hierarchy of risk reduction, everything that we do for well-being or mental health in organisations at the moment is kind of like protective equipment. It's the pointy bit on that triangle. It's accepting that the workplace is harmful. We have a harmful workplace and we're going to have to help you cope with it. And for me, that's not really good enough, especially when quite a lot of the stress that people end up being put under is because of poor working practice or poor managers or shadow, like we've just said, shadow long working hours or equipment that's not functioning correctly and therefore makes things take longer. Lack of role clarity, all of these things that are actually very addressable if we were to look at them. So the idea that actually the only way we can deal with it, say for example, a team who are very stressed because they have very, very tight deadlines and are constantly having to deliver in short periods of time and work long hours. The idea that the only thing we can do for them is give them resilience training and then a bit of time off feels like, I don't want to, I have to be careful because I don't want to come across like I'm saying all that stuff is not useful and is not helpful, and it absolutely is.
Absolutely is, yes.
But we didn't reduce the number of the number of fatalities at work and the number of accidents at work and the number of sick days at work due to physical health through giving everybody gas masks and having a first aid kit. That's not how we did it. And if we want to have the same impact on mental health, which is getting gradually every year, not even gradually, significantly every year more significant in the workplace, then we need to start taking a more proactive approach to it.
Okay, so that sounds brilliant. We're all incredibly busy people. How do we do that without causing additional stress to our colleagues around us? What steps should leaders take on this call to go away and say, right, what should I do? What's my takeaway action I should be considering today that's going to start making a preventative difference in the workplace?
The first question the first action I think is to actually start asking the people who do the work what gets in their way. It seems quite obvious, but we're in a situation where we have a lot of people doing a lot of work that is very stressful, and I can understand how it's happened, to be honest, because what happens is you have your employee satisfaction survey. It says this team have poor work-life balance, and whilst that analogy of health and safety and thinking about mental health like health and safety, that makes perfect sense to people. Whenever I say, if it's your job to lift heavy things, then you get taught how to lift heavy things before you start work. But we don't do that for mental health. Everyone goes, oh yeah, you're right, yeah. And everyone gets it as an analogy. And then you say, but okay, why don't we start treating mental health like physical health and start doing risk assessments and start approaching it from in a health and safety way? They kind of go, oh, that sounds hard.
So when you said that something then which has just resonated with me, you said go and ask people what gets in their way. What are you talking about there? Are we talking about systems, processes, approval lists, workplace environment? Have you got any examples?
So an example might be you have a team of people who produce a set of reporting every month, for example, and the last week and a half of every single month, they're all up late, they're all in the office late, they are all stressed, and that over time is starting to contribute to people who are now becoming, there's a bit of presenteeism, productivity's dropping because everybody's tired, maybe you've got a couple of people signed off with stress because it's difficult. And what we do there is, we give them some resilience training or a bit of time off. Actually, maybe looking at going, well, are we managing that client correctly? Have we set unreasonable expectations? Do these people have the processes that they need in order to deliver this work? Are we, and most of the time, any process, whether it's a piece of, whether it's a physical manufacturing process or whether it's a knowledge work process, whatever it is, most of the time, if you've not looked at that, if you've not put that under scrutiny, you've not examined it, over time, cruft gets into it. There'll be something that stopped working and there's a workaround, or actually something was wrong once, so now we have 5 different checks that we have to go through, and all of those things just kind of build up waste in the process that ultimately adds stress and time and additional work that isn't adding any value. Everybody hates doing it, but you've still got to deliver at the same time.
Yes.
So,
and I can absolutely think of checklists that we've had to go through because something's gone wrong in the past. Therefore, we're going to put a step in this checklist, and not necessarily from my life at Risk Evolves, but in other organisations where we have to do that because something went wrong in the past, rather than looking at holistically to say, is there a better way that we can do it?
Absolutely. And I think that's the really interesting thing for me around. So my background coming to this area of work was from process redesign and productivity and lean management. And I was always interested that if we went in and improved a process, we'd make it harder, better, faster, stronger. But the people were always happier because people like being good at their work.
Yeah.
And people like to have agency and autonomy around how they do their work. And if you go and ask somebody, everyone's got an opinion about how their work could be better. So, and I can see what's happened in a lot of senses because that feels harder. It feels harder to fundamentally go to a team and look at, okay, what are the things, where are the areas that are causing you obstacles, and which are ultimately, all of those obstacles are, that's the beginning of asking, well, what are the psychosocial risks? Because that obstacle might be a poor process, it might be a poor manager, it might be a toxic team working environment. Those are all things that are going to contribute to it. It feels harder to fix those things than it does to give HR a budget for a mindfulness app or whatever it happens to be. The plus side, of course, being that if you fix the processes, you get happier people, or managers. It's good for the business as well,
Well, absolutely, and we all know that lean processes actually drive better efficiencies, and therefore is a better use of resources, and typically means that the business can either be more profitable or more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go out and ask your employees, is there a risk, though, that you're setting an expectation that somehow as a leader within your organisation, you're going to wave a magic wand and everything goes away?
I think this is where we've got to think about adult-to-adult relationships with our
Mm-hmm.
employees and that autonomy and agency around people's work. I think the more that management, leadership, and organisations say, okay, these are your problems, we're going to fix them for you, the more likely you are to set yourself up for a fall, but also the more likely you are to get it wrong, and the more likely you are for it to take a really, really long time. So the way that I would always approach that is, okay, well, what's getting in your way, and what can we do about it? What can we, as a group, as a team, as a set of people who have the same outcomes that we are trying to achieve in work, what can we do about that? And some of that might be, well, and as a leader, as a manager, the questions I'll be asking is, okay, what can I do to help? Not I'm going to take this off you and go away and fix it. What can I do to help remove obstacles? And that might be, well, okay, we've got this one particular customer who is extremely demanding. We're doing lots of stuff that's beyond the scope of the job. Someone could address that. That'd be great. Maybe maybe it is a systems related thing, although it's often not systems related. I need to go back and look at who the quote is from because I'm using it a lot at the moment, but I read a quote recently, which is, if you think technology is the answer to your problems, you don't understand technology or your problems. And so often it's about communication and accountability and interpersonal.
Absolutely, and just to re-emphasise that point as well, Tim, certainly you need to understand your process before you use technology, otherwise all you're going to do is make an inefficient process just work a bit quicker. So yeah, absolutely understanding the problem. And just going back, I certainly remember from my previous life, I was working with a group of engineers, and one of their frustrations with it was that they'd be sent out to a job where they were pretty sure that they knew what the problem was before they got to the job, and they weren't allowed to have the part in their vans because it wasn't part of the process. So therefore they would have to make 2 trips, and they always found that really difficult, not just because they get to a job, they go, yeah, it was the problem we thought it was, we've got to come back to the office, etc. But because they ended up relaying the message to the client of, it's whatever widget has broken, I'm going to need to go back to the office, get the part and come back out again. And therefore it was always them as the first line people in front of the customers that were typically getting, unfortunately, the customer backlash.
Absolutely. And because it's the people who do the work. I mean, this is why I think it's particularly why taking these kind of approaches to mental health and knowledge work, I think, are really, really important. Because if you're in a physical environment, risks are often visible, but also when something's not working optimally, it's often visible. You'll get a bottleneck, you'll get inventory starting to stack up, something might be on fire, I don't know. But in knowledge work or in an office environment, somebody having a bad day sat behind their computer looks very similar to somebody having a good day sat behind their computer. And now that often a lot of knowledge workers are working from home, it becomes even more difficult. You know, so how do we spot when that person's actually got COVID and they've dialed into work anyway, and are clearly in no shape to be doing their work, and are now becoming a bit of a productivity drain and a bit of a bottleneck, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
And how did we get to that place in the first place that was expected?
Yes.
So being able to, I mean, so it's lifting the lid on a whole bunch of stuff that we've, as I say, we've already done it in physical environments. And I imagine when people started lifting the lid on what's dangerous in the workplace, that felt like hard work. And what if we do that? What are we going to uncover? You know, but we got through it. And that's kind of the stage that I feel like we're at with psychosocial risk at the moment.
Fantastic. So I know we've got a number of people on the call. I don't know whether we've got any questions coming through for you, Tim, but I'm finding this really interesting because I think as leaders, it's hard, isn't it? And sometimes us as leaders are clearly stressed with what's going on in the world as well. You know, deadlines that we've got, you know, where perhaps it's customers that are paying late. It could be all types of different things. Whether or not there are any other things that you think that people should be thinking about from a leadership team perspective, and is it just about having an open dialogue with everybody that, you know, you recognise that you haven't got that magic wand, but what you want is people to come and say, this isn't working because X, Y, Z, and potentially suggesting, of course, some remedies for that.
I think it's the starting point, and I think we've got to be really clear that just as with everything, with especially related to mental health, people are going to be more. It's going to take longer for people to feel psychologically safe to come forward and talk. So I think open dialogue to start with is really important. I think making it really clear that you're open to thinking preventatively, rather than just, oh well, that team are stressed, so we'll get a mental health first aider or something, you know. And starting to think more strategically about the causes of risk.
Okay.
I think if ISO 45003 actually implementing ISO 45003 feels difficult for organisations at the moment, I think, because the area of the business that currently looks after health and safety is not the area of the business that looks after mental health and well-being. So you'll generally have your safety, whoever currently looks after safety, and well-being, mental health might be an HR thing, it might be an engagement thing, it sometimes belongs to internal communications. So there's an awful lot more collaboration needed than I think is generally the case with safety teams, who but then also there is also a lot of cross education required.
Yeah. So one of the questions we've got coming in is, what do you do if your manager isn't listening to your needs? And for me, this is very much about organisation culture as well. You should be able to talk to anybody within your organisation, no matter where they are, if your manager isn't listening to your needs. But what are your views? Have you seen this anywhere?
Well, yeah, and I think I think there is a point of that actually it starts to need demonstrating. So one of the things that we do at Make Work Better is to try and lift the lid on that a little bit and actually show to managers, okay, there's going to be a bunch of unspoken stuff. You know, everyone knows the stuff that doesn't work at all, and everyone knows the stuff that works well. There's always going to be a bunch of unspoken and broken stuff in a team, which is contributing to probably contributing to everyone have to fight their work and work harder than they need to. But and if that's the case, will be contributing to people to psychosocial harm. I think show them, you know, if they're not listening, walk them through it, get them to spend a bit of time working, and if you're not getting anywhere there, then I think there is a necessary duty for all of us at this point to be actually starting to flag in more senior ways that we have danger, and start to talk about it in terms of the company has a duty to protect my mental health. Yes. In the same way that they stop me from falling down the stairs or sticking my hand in the machine.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And we know anecdotally as well from some of the other partners that we work with that we're seeing now an increase in unfortunately claims under directors and officers liability insurance, where perhaps D&O, excuse me, where directors haven't been managing where they should be. We know that we've got an increased number of people going off sick through mental health problems. This for me, Tim, I think there's a real opportunity here for organisations to be leaders in this space. And you're absolutely right. It's not just about putting lots and lots of people through mental health first aid courses. It's about leadership, listening to what needs to happen within their business to make their business more effective and therefore de-stress the workplace in the first place. Now, Tim, you're doing a course on this, aren't you, with the IRSM in a few weeks?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to pick on the leadership angle piece. It's probably worth remembering as well that a lot of the time we make people managers and leaders because they're good at something else. And organisations generally are not brilliant at preparing people for what management entails. So I think we also need to be mindful of that when we thinking about managers. If your manager's not listening to you, maybe they have absolutely no idea what to do with it.
That's a good call as well. Yes.
You know, so I think we need to. That is something else that I do. You know, there are bad managers out there. They're not necessarily bad managers because they're bad people.
Completely agree. And just because you say somebody's really good at, I don't know, software development or sales or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to go into a management and straight leadership role. So completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. Now, I did just mention that you are running a course with the double IRSM in a few weeks' time, and certainly any delegates and customers of Risk Evolves have the opportunity to be offered the double IRSM membership rate, which is slightly reduced for the non-member rate. Do you want to just give a really quick overview of that course, and if anybody's interested, then they can contact either yourself or us for more information and details about that session?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a half-day course. It's an introduction to ISO 45003. So it'll talk at a quite a high level about how ISO 45003 is, how it fits in with current management standards, and really what are the considerations for risk and safety managers as they start to enter into the murky world of mental and psychological health, and starting to give some strategies about how to think about how to approach 45003.
And 45003, unlike 45001, which is the health and safety standard, 45003 is a guidance standard, isn't it? So it doesn't come with a big price tag attached to it. It's something that anybody can pick up and read, and just it's good practice, isn't it, Tim? In fact, it's not good practice, it's best practice.
Absolutely. And although it's not, so it's a guidance standard. I think it's free to read on the ISO website at the moment, not necessarily free to download. I believe that the BSI are working on a separate certification, so there have been a lot of requests for certifications. I don't know a great deal about the detail behind that, but yeah, as it's not an accredited standard, there are some people looking at it. What is interesting though is that it's starting to, in some parts of the world, so in Canada, I think there are now some insurance companies who are starting to insist on ISO 45003 compliance in order to pay out on health claims for mental health.
Oh, really?
Things
okay.
Like so although it's not although you know these things are never mandatory and it is best practice, I think there is going to start to become a little bit of a push towards, you know, this is best practice, recommended practice, and there are potential consequences to not taking into account.
Brilliant. That's been really, really brilliant, Tim. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to take us through this. As I say, the call is being recorded and will be available up on the Risk Evolves website, if not later today, then by the beginning of next week. Look forward to working with you again, Tim. As I say, if anybody wants details of that session that Tim will be running with the International Institute of Risk and Safety Managers, there's a big mouthful of stuff. Yeah, IRSM, then just let us know, and certainly we'll be promoting it as well through the Risk Evolves social media and so on and so forth. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, Tim. Hopefully you'll stick around for the rest of the day as well when we talk about some risk assessments on our next call with Ruth Waring. But if not, thank you very much everybody for listening. As I say, date and June the 23rd for Save the Date. If not, see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.